Hello, lads. Today we're going to talk about, as the thumbnail implied, diverse characters in young adult fiction. Now, it's important to note that while young adult fiction has always included characters of different backgrounds and men and women and all that stuff, they are typically white. The lead characters are typically male. There's also this whole black hair and green eyes trend that can be seen in Percy Jackson and Harry Potter. Um, Actually, I wonder what's up with that. But, typically the lead characters of young adult novels are white. Well, today, as I already said, we're going to talk about why books that have more diverse characters and more inclusive characters are just kind of the best overall. Not to be that person, but you typically find that the more diverse the characters are, the better the books are. Maybe that's just me. I'm not. It could be. So, before we get into books that have diverse characters, the very first thing we need to talk about is this idea that Dr. Rudine Sim Bishop coined. And this idea and these terms are called mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. Now, YA novels can serve as different versions of each of these. The first of those terms that we're going to talk about is the mirror. Any novel can serve as a mirror, and all that means is that the reader can see themselves reflected back within that novel. So for me, if the lead character is black, if the lead character is female, and if she likes literature or if she likes talking a lot, that novel and that character can serve as a mirror to me and to my lived experiences. It's very important to note that I'm not going to have all the same characteristics as a character in a novel, and neither will a reader, but just characters that can hit those basics and just fulfill that portion of the need will serve as this mirror for a student to really see themselves in. And that's always important. We talk about representation, but that's kind of this high term, right? What does representation mean? And it's not always enough. So I will get into that a little bit later, but I am wearing a completely different shirt than I am in the thumbnail. I took that picture a couple weeks ago, and I just really liked it. And now we're in a different outfit. It's purple or pink, depending on how this video renders for you. But yeah, I like it. So the next term from Dr. Bishop is the term windows. And any novel that serves as a window is it's like giving the reader a peek into a world or a culture that they've never experienced before. So some novels that can serve as windows are novels that look at Indian culture, or novels that look at Chinese culture, or Filipino culture, Vietnamese culture. One of the many different cultures in South America, Mexican, Peruvian, anything that the reader is not a part of, if that novel focuses in on that experience and those experiences of other people, then it can serve as a window. I can peek through and see the lived experiences of other people and of other characters. So that is novels that serve as windows. And those are also really important because, again, this idea of representation. The last concept from Dr. Sim is the concept of the sliding glass door. Now, the sliding glass door is it's like almost a combination of a window and a literal door. That's why it's called a glass door. And when I think of glass, I think of see-through. But the concept of the sliding glass door is when the author creates this world and it immerses the student into the world, the student or the reader. So young adult novels that you'll typically see that are the sliding glass door concept are anything that is like fantasy or dystopian or utopian. Any of those worlds the reader can just open the door and kind of step in and immerse themselves in a world and culture that they've never seen before, those are sliding glass doors. And they also can have issues of representation. So now we need to talk representation. And in order to talk representation, we need to talk the literary canon. Now, the literary canon are any of those books that are accepted as these are the books we teach in school. These are the famous authors. These are the famous poets. These are this and that. It's anything that's this accepted idea. When you think canon, like when I first heard the word, I was thinking like anything that's accepted in the world of the book. So in the world of Harry Potter books, the canon is that there are wizards, right? So literary canon in our present day world is filled with white men. Like American white men, Shakespeare, Jonathan Swift, Hamilton, all of these white men. And I know Hamilton isn't the same like as Shakespeare, John Swift, but he was a writer. He's one of those people that you read. Or Charles Dickens and basically any of your assigned readings in school, typically the boring ones. No shade, Charles Dickens. Those are the white men, quote unquote straight white men. There are some like ideas about some of them that just had best buds, but we'll never know. But because they wrote the canon, what do you expect to find in those stories that they've written? Exactly. Characters that are straight white men. So now we have this deal of representation. Who gets represented? Who gets to be written about? Well, when there are straight white men writing the characters, once again, those characters are straight white men, and that excludes almost every other person on the planet. So representation is this idea that as long as you represent everybody, you're good, but it has its own faults and it has layers. So it's very important to note that people of color are not monoliths, and neither can characters of color be treated as such. All black people are not the same. All Chinese people are not the same. All Mexican people are not the same. All Nigerian, Ghanaian people are not the same, right? So when you get into these ideal of representation, a lot of authors who aren't like thinking that far ahead, who are just thinking with the idea of like this token character mindset, they're like, well, I included a black character, and it's like, yes, but was your black character killed off to serve the purpose of the white main character? Are they just the side character? You see this a lot in movies, especially old movies, where you have this like buddy cop idea, like buddy cop. But if you look at teen movies, like you'll have the white main character and she has her black best friend who is always hyping her up. The most recent thing I can think of is literally Netflix's Tall Girl, where the idea was that the girl was tall, so she was oppressed, which is like not to go against the plight of tall people everywhere, and she has a black friend, and the whole purpose of the black friend is just to hype her up. That is her entire point of being. I don't think she has any other depth of character. You don't know what's going on in her life because the story is not about her. And also, she's just a token. And people will see that and they'll be like, look, you got your representation. There's a black character on screen. And it's like, but what did she do? Another perpetrator of this, like, tokenism representation is literally Marvel movies. Now, I love Marvel, and we will go back to talking diverse characters in young adult fiction in a second. But Marvel started out as comics, and they started out as comics about white people, about mainly white people. Marvel stands, do not come in my YouTube comments. I'm not coming for you. I love Marvel. I love Iron Man. I love Captain America. But Iron Man has his black best friend named Rhodey, and we don't find out a lot about Rhodey for a lot of things. Like, we don't find out a lot about him in the movies. We find out more about him in the comics, but all we know is he's Tony Stark's right-hand man. And then you get Captain America, who I'm talking Steve Rogers Captain America. He also has his black best friend Sam. And it's like, what does Sam Wilson want to do? We don't know. Luckily, Marvel and their writers gave Sam a show, so we love to see that. Check out Captain America and the Winter Soldier. I mean, the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. No spoilers here. And you get more into Sam's character there, but it speaks at a larger issue where black characters and other characters of color are just being sprinkled in. Like, they're like, oh, here's crumbs of representation. These people can represent you. And that's not how it works. And the problem with this is when you token these characters, you get into really dangerous stereotypes. So if the only Chinese character in your book is a witch, what are you trying to perpetuate about Chinese people? If the only woman in your whole story, the only female character in your whole story is a mother, and she takes care of the children, she stays home, what are you trying to say about women, right? If the only black character is the sassy best friend, is that how you see black people? And once again, we get into this idea of a monolith. Because characters are not monoliths, you can't do certain things when there's only one of them. And so we get into this idea of, well, you can't, the author thinking, well, I want to write this bad character, but then they choose that bad character to be very flamboyant and curly hair, and it's like, okay, so what are you trying to say there? Like, or if they want the weak character, then they become like whoever they pick. If it's a character of color, or if it's anybody that's not a man, then it's like, well, now you're perpetuating these harmful stereotypes, right? And that becomes, once again, very dangerous. Now, when you look at things like, let's take the Black Panther movie, for example. People die in Black Panther, and people get hurt. But because all the characters are fleshed out, and they're all these black Wakandian, which is just an amalgamation of different African cultures, character, you're not furthering any stereotypes because they're all fleshed out and they're all well developed, right? So you can as an author kill off a character without it seeming like you're killing off your only diverse character. You can give people these complex traits and allow them to not be a monolith when you have more than one. So that's where the issue of representation comes in. So now we're going to bring it back to novels and young adult fiction in particular. Now, some of the best young adult fiction I have ever read have always been characters that felt real to me and characters that felt like they had an express purpose for living. So, for example, I read this really great book called When Dimple Met Rishi, and not only is it one of the greatest romances alive, I'm not exaggerating, like, it's fantastic, and I cried. Sanja Menon, and I hope I'm not pronouncing her name wrong, I looked it up. She wrote these Indian characters with such care and such love that they were allowed to be whatever they wanted to be. They speak Hindi in the book, and I don't understand Hindi. I can't speak that language, but the whole time I'm reading this, I'm like, yes, this is great. Dimple is the most, like, she's pretentious. She has problems with her mother, but she is allowed to be that. She's allowed to just exist. She's not serving any other purpose than living her life, and she wants to be this app developer, and she's allowed to do that because this author took the time to create a character from the love of her heart. Like, from her heart, she made this character. And then you have Rishi, and Rishi is equally as pretentious, but Rishi is also a hopeless romantic. And Rishi is also like, he's all these things, and he's not just a stereotype of a character, right? And this also gets into the authors, because in order to have really good diverse fiction, you need to have really good diverse authors. And so diverse authors and authors of different colors and backgrounds and that come from different countries are needed to become a part of the new literary canon. They need to exist and they need to be promoted because from diverse authors you get diverse stories, and when you get diverse stories you get diverse students reading, you get more people reading, right? Which is not to say that white authors should not write characters of color, because they need to. Because one of the things about books and one of the things about novels is they have this almost express power to socialize their readers, especially young readers, to the world around them, right? When you read more diverse books, you also become connected to learning more about diverse cultures. You no longer are stuck in an echo chamber of your own culture and your own thoughts constantly coming at you over and over again. You read books in other languages, you start to learn about that culture and appreciate that culture more, and you learn the taboos. And then hopefully you make diverse friends, right? And those diverse friends lead you to becoming a more well-rounded person. It's just one of those things that are really needed. Like, you cannot go without it, right? You need to have that diverse perspective. So, on white authors that are writing diverse characters, I would like to mention one of my authors that really shaped my formative years was Rick Riordan and the Percy Jackson series. And Percy is a white dude, and it's like the characters are white, and I'm not gonna say that Rick Riordan's like this fantastic person that can do no wrong, because he definitely does some wrong. But in his later works, in the Percy Jackson spin-off series, he started adding in diverse characters that felt like he did the research to learn how to write these characters and to learn how to show them with love. Hazel is a good example. She's black and she's from Louisiana, and she gets to have all this complex characteristics without seeming like a stereotype. And then one of the things that I will give Rick Riordan is that he as a white man opened the door to allow diverse creators in. He has this imprint at Disney called Rick Riordan Presents. And in these books, he reached out to authors of different cultures and of different backgrounds and asked them to write stories from their cultural heritage and folklore. So we have black authors, we have Native American authors, we have Indian authors, and they're all writing these stories from their own folklore that they grew up with. And they're all so important, and they're all in that same vein of Harry Potter, of Harry Potter and Percy Jackson. This folklore has come to life. These ancient ideas and stories have come back to life to share something. So I will give Rick Riordan that. He knew that he can't write all this mythology of other cultures. So what did he do? He hired people from that culture to write the. Rick Riordan has kind of successfully created this new literary canon of mythology writers who bring it to the present day, and he's given access to it to the young readers that were his audience and are still his audience. And so once again, new literary canon, we add these new writers in and these new creators in, and they become everything that a lot of people couldn't imagine. A lot of people didn't know these stories were out there because they didn't seek them out, or they weren't made accessible for them to seek out. So while we're talking about diverse characters, we also need to talk about a little bit about when they go wrong. Let's talk about Twilight again, show. So, if any of you seen the first video on my channel, you can tell I'm a little critical of Twilight. And by a little, I mean a lot of critical. I love Twilight. Twilight was a part of my formative years, right? But Twilight is one of those books written by a white woman who does not do representation well at all. She has diverse characters, and she made Native American people animals. Like, let's just start there. She made them animals. And the problem with this is when your only characters of color are animals, you are dehumanizing an entire race of people. Now, whether she did it on purpose, I cannot say, but it is inherently problematic. She only refers to them as animals. She took the culture of the Quileute tribe, which actually exists in Forks, Washington, and she was like, I'm going to rewrite their history so they can serve my vampire romance novel without permission. And as far as I know, she did not donate any of the success from her books back to that tribe. Speaking of, there's a link in my bio to the Quileute Move to Higher Ground fundraiser, because they are intensely affected by the weather up in Forks, Washington. So the link is there if you guys would like to help them out. But yeah, Jacob Black is, first of all, she ruined his character because people liked him too much. So there's that. And I'm not even going to get into that because that could be a whole video on its own. I'm so sorry, Jacob. I can't believe she did that to you. But Jacob Black and his whole family are indigenous people. And they are the only characters of color in the book. And when she took their culture and said, well, they're going to be werewolves, once again, she stripped them of their humanity, and she called them animals. And not even that, she also came up with this whole idea of imprinting and made some of them literal like terrible people. Why are you imprinting on a child? Like, why did she come up with that? Like, I can't even, let me, But it's not even that. Also, none of her vampires are vampires of color. I know if you've seen the movies, you're like, oh, what about Laurent? Or if you've seen the last movie, it's like, what about Zafrina or all of them? In her books, if you were a person of color and you turned into a vampire, you lost all your skin tone and you became white. In fact, directors had to fight her really hard on even casting Laurent as a black man. She is one of those people that are not really good at writing diverse characters at all. And this is not a complete dunk on her. She can get better. That's the thing. And that's the point, essentially, of this video. Is that when you write diverse characters, or when you write a story, you can, as you read more and as you become friends with more diverse people, then your stories are going to get better because they have no choice but to get better. If you surround yourself with diverse people, then you are, like, once again, you're going to get better. Like, I don't make the rules. This is just something that happens. So, Twilight rant over, but what I would love to talk about is this new book that I am absolutely obsessed with called Raybearer by Jordan Ifueko. Raybearer is an absolutely excellent book, and the reason it's so excellent is because Ifueko takes the folklore of her family and of her past and of her Nigerian culture and her Yoruba culture, and she develops this character in her main character, which I don't want to spoil any of it. I'm not going to spoil this book. I want you to go out and buy it. But, like, this entire book is about this young child, like, going into magic. Like, this is a fantasy novel, and it's high fantasy, and it centers a black girl. And one of my favorite things about Jordan Ifueko is that on her website, which will be linked down below because I want you to go buy her book, she says that she's a stan of black girls with 4C curls. And she writes novels for them. And that is just one of those things that absolutely shakes me to my core. It's like, yes, she writes novels for me. Once again, we have that mirror. It's like, I am not Nigerian, but I am black, and I see myself in this book. I see the child that wanted to explore, that wanted to practice magic, that dreamed of these worlds. And it's just a opening in a door. Like, not only is it a sliding door, it's a mirror and a sliding door. I can go and dive in. And one of the most powerful things I think that I saw in Raybearer is literally just the opening dedication. It reads, "For the kids scanning fairy tales for a hero with a face like theirs, and for the girls whose stories we compressed into pities and wonders, triumphs and cautions, without asking, even once, for their names." There's something so powerful in that statement of saying these girls' stories who were never told and these kids who never saw themselves in a fairy tale are finally getting their stories told and are finally being written about with such love and such care and such gentle hands. And it's just one of those things that is just so overwhelming and so beautiful to think about that it makes me want to cry. Like, this is the power of diverse media creates these instances where it's like, wow, I can do this, right? It's not even just representation. It's the way that it can completely change lives to see themselves in a book and to see themselves reflected in the idea of existing and being allowed to exist and being allowed to be anything but the stereotype that they are forced on by media, right? It's just so powerful and so beautiful, and it just makes me once again want to cry. Go buy Raybearer. I literally know I haven't gone into the plot at all, but if you like fantasy novels, or if you just want to see a black girl kick butt and take names, go read this book. It's literally just so beautiful. Also, like, the cover photo for the book is also just genius. On my thumbnail, I have it like right behind my head because I just think it's the best thing to ever happen. The best part about Raybearer and about Jordan Ifueko herself is that she said that when she writes stories, she does not like to over Africanize her stories, because Jordan Ifueko isn't just Nigerian and from Nigerian descent. She's also from California, and she's also a black woman living in America, and she's also an author and a student and a writer. And because she contains all these complexities, why shouldn't her characters contain the same complexities? Why shouldn't her characters also be allowed this chance to grow? It's not just an African story. It's not just a story about a black girl. It's also about this and that, which I won't go into because I don't want to spoil the book. So, in conclusion, because this video is getting kind of long, I will just say that diverse stories are necessary. They are literally life-giving. And when you take the literary canon that is current and just completely crumble it, like, those books are good, but seek out authors of diverse backgrounds and seek out books that center characters of diverse backgrounds. Because when you do that, you will be a better person for it, right? You will be an enlightened person, and you will be a better read person. And honestly, you're going to find way better stories, way funner stories. Like, and it's not just in young adult fiction. I mean, seek out diverse authors in crime fiction. Seek them out in adult fantasy. Seek them out in romance stories. And you will be better for it. And that's the only thing that can really begin to change this world we live in, is if more people look for diverse authors and if more students are taught diverse books in class. So just create your canon of your own, right? Just do that. Make a list. I am going to add a list to my bio of books I've read along with my Goodreads account, so you can also enjoy these stories. It's they're excellent, and you are doing yourself a disservice if you don't go read them. Also, I learned about Raybearer from one of my favorite YouTubers, um, named Dominic Noble, and he did a whole video on it, and that's where I found out about it and equally became obsessed. So the link to his video below if you want to actually find out more and don't care too much about spoilers. He gives a really excellent synopsis. Okay. You guys like my sloth mug? I got it for like Halloween, and I just think it's great. Okay, bye. Like, comment, and subscribe.